live.
Okay. Good evening. This is the Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission workshop, April 6th, 2021. This is not a voting meeting, so we will not take roll. If Ruth joins us later, that will be okay because we're not voting on anything. On our agenda to discuss this evening, we have the work of the hiring committee for the executive director position that we will address first. Scott Miskell has brought proposals for updated parks use fees that we need to address, that we plan to bring to the regular meeting in 2 weeks to vote on. And then lastly, we have a first draft of bylaws for the commission that we will just address a few issues in there, get feedback before we do a second draft to get out to everybody, including the mayor and city attorney to review. So Dave, if you want to start off.
Sure, yeah. So the hiring committee, which is myself and Sue and Ruth, met approximately, I guess it was 2 weeks ago at this point. And we talked about, talked about getting the hiring process going. And agenda items or things that needed to get done are, well, actually, let me back up. We also talked about how we wanted to get it done. It is spelled out somewhat in the bylaws. We are needing to place an ad in 2 local papers, one of which has to be a daily. And we also need to place an ad in I think, nationally circulated Parks and Recreation magazine or something to that effect. So I think, Sue, you were going to look at venues, the nationally.
Yeah, well, I was checking out websites, which is what we'd figured out how we'd approach the national.
Yep.
Yeah, I would think there would be an online resource that would be far better than a print publication for that sort of thing.
Yeah, the one I found was the website for the National Association of County, Park and Recreation Officials.
Okay, and Ruth was going to look into local papers. I think the restriction that one of them needs to be daily circulated means it's like the Democrat
Yeah.
Chronicle?
I'm sorry, could I correct that? The one I was recommending is the National Recreation and Park Association.
Okay.
That is the common.
And one of the local papers here in town, I think. And then I was going to put together a job description, actually something for posting, which I did and sent around to the rest of the commission, I think last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking for some feedback on that. I think, some other things that we talked about, like Scott Miskell had put together a job description, which is kind of here's what the director does. And I think it combined both the duties and tasks and also sort of the qualifications.
Yeah.
And I think what we wanted to do is separate that. So we've got a posting that we're putting out there for applicants who are interested in the job to find us and send us their information. And then we want something, I think, that outlines what the director should be doing on a day-to-day basis, who that person reports to, and gives a guide for how that person is going to be reviewed at the end of the year for a performance review. So that person knows what they're supposed to be doing and how they're going to be judged on their performance, and it's very clear to everybody how that should all work.
Okay, so the executive director job description, you guys put that together? Or was that
No,
draft
that's
that
something
Scott?
I think, Scott, did you?
Okay.
Is that something you put
Yeah.
together?
Yes,
Yeah.
I did.
Okay. Yep, and I'm less concerned about that right now as opposed to getting the posting ready and sent out. I think, we can, I think I said this in an email when I sent around the job description. I think, to a degree, the job description can be tailored a little bit if we have a candidate. I know the last director either didn't have an aptitude or a desire to do financials, and that sort of slipped by the wayside. And we can work with a person that doesn't want to, doesn't do those things. I think if we get that out in the open up front and make sure that we assign those tasks to somebody else, or we can make sure that person does that. But I think, there's certain things the director has to do, and those can be spelled out, and I think there's some things that can be assigned. But in any case, in the short term, I'm less concerned about what the day-to-day tasks are as opposed to just getting the posting up.
Yeah,
And we can come back to making sure we've got a tight job description before we hire that person.
yeah, I think, and the thing I liked about the way this was put together, you can peel the duties and responsibilities out of it, because that really is the day-to-day, and that's more the things that you're going to be measured against. I think the essential functions need to be part of the job description, although they can be abbreviated from this. Performance requirements, knowledge, skills, and abilities, I think is critical to any job posting. And then the experience and training requirements, and I would see, that typically you're going to put them in there as minimums and preferred. I think that, 5 years progressively responsible experience in management administration is pretty light for this type of position. I would prefer to see 8 to 10 years. I think one of the things you got into last time was you had a director that didn't have the experience in a lot of the things that he needed, didn't have a track record to demonstrate that. And I think that's, it really showed the weakness in that approach. It's not, even though it's not a big budget park system like you would find in Rogers or Bentonville or Fayetteville, it is a big responsibility park system because it is 1,800 acres. And it's a very diverse park system in terms of what the offering is. And it's a very small town, so everything is under a microscope. So I think it's critical that we do make sure that we're getting people that have the skills and the knowledge to deal with all of those things. And somewhere in here, I think especially in the posting, it needs to be clear that it's a town with a population of 2,000 people, but a park system that encompasses 1,800 acres and 15 different parks facilities, if you include all the reservations.
Yeah, more than that,
what the number
actually.
is.
Yeah.
So it's a big undertaking. And from my understanding of the last time the search happened, that was one of the big issues, is that when people got in and they realized how big it was and how much there was to it, you suddenly had people who were looking for salaries that were far beyond what we're able to pay. So I just think it needs to be fairly clear that it is a big park system, that people need to understand what it is.
Any other comments?
Yeah, Dave, I saw one version that had the requirements of what the applicant should have, and I saw a version that didn't. I want to make sure the final version does have that in there,
Okay.
both on the job and formal training.
Okay. Now, we think that's important just for making sure the right types of people send us information.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, it looks like we don't need any qualifications if we don't put any in there, so...
Sure.
Right.
And I also, if I'm looking for a job, I want to know what they're looking for, so I can tell if I feel like I'm a good fit for that.
Okay.
I think something else is that it needs to be clear, and it's not really clear in either one, that the executive director and all of the park staff works for the commission and not for the city of Eureka Springs. And I say that because in looking, as I was doing research for the bylaws, most of the communities around here that have parks commissions, and Rogers has a parks commission, it's an advisory commission. They have a full-time park staff and budget, and the commission
So, I mean, a lot of
serves
these
in an
things, though,
advisory
I
function.
wonder, is it crucial for that to be in the initial posting? 'Cause, I mean, obviously, we'll explain these things. It's, I mean, because it's a little bit complicated and maybe a little bit different than it is in other places, but I feel like, because we're going to post this someplace, like, in order to keep it from being like, you know, a 10-page post.
Oh, I think it would be fairly easy to say that so you've got the position reports to the chair of the SPRC, the chair as well as the other 6 members of the commission are volunteers appointed and tasked with managing the city's parks, primarily through hiring a director and then overseeing budgeting, et cetera, et cetera. The commission is largely independent of the city government, but coordination with city departments is routine. It would be easy enough to say that this position is hired by the commission,
Okay,
and then the terms, conditions, rights, and benefits of employment shall be in accordance with those accorded to all employees of the city of Eureka Springs, which is part of the ordinance, the way that's written. So it just makes it clear to them that they work for the commission. And I think that's, again, kind of looking at some of the commission issues, there was a lack of clarity between commission and staff, both here and most recently at the CAPC as to who actually worked for who. And it does need to be clear, because I think that was
okay.
the root of
No, I mean, I wouldn't dispute that it needs to be clear to a person that we're interested in hiring. I guess it just doesn't necessarily strike me as those details need to be 100% clear for someone to decide, do I want to apply for this job?
Yeah,
If you catch my drift. But it's fine. We may as well have it clear right from the outset so that, you know, here, it doesn't get dropped or missed or somehow not put out there.
And Dave, one final thing. You'd spoken about the prior director and who is doing the job now. I don't think any of that needs to be in there. They can
Okay.
look online and find it, but I don't think we need to provide that information.
Okay.
You could-
Yeah, I mean, I would expect anybody who's seriously considering applying is going to find all that stuff out anyway,
Right.
because it's all online. So, you know, I kind of went back and forth on this, like how much information to actually give versus, you know, let them, I mean, all of this stuff is available, and if you're really interested in the job, you're probably going to figure out, okay, what's the city like, what's the park system like, you know, and it's not hard to find out from looking in the local papers, like what happened with the last director and so on and so forth, so.
well, any serious candidate, their first question is going to be, can I get a copy of the job description? Can I get a copy of any parks rules or bylaws so, yeah,
Sure.
I think it just needs, it can be brief, and I think that's what you've got here is fine, with kind of a high level, you know, taking the essential functions and taking the performance requirements.
Okay.
At kind of a high level bullet point.
Okay.
And then any candidates who apply for it, if, like I said, if they're serious, that's the first thing they're going to ask for is a job description. So they'll kind of work hand in hand there.
Okay.
So I just have a question on how this works. So the announcement you're putting together, Dave, is, you know, good to go online, but we obviously don't want to put that much in a newspaper ad.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my
So
point.
just wondering, is that going to get placed somewhere where, you know, for the newspaper ad, we can just have a link to that?
Well, I think
We could put it on the website.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean,
'Cause
it's not going to be
got-
an active link, but just the website.
You created, there's a spot on the website where we were putting job postings. That's how we were getting around, like, the high turnover positions.
In reality, those go to Kim Stryker, and she puts them on the city website.
On the city website?
And it was decided that just to be consistent, that's the way it should be.
Okay, then we ought to do the same thing with
Yes, that
this.
gets put there, and then
And then we can just put a link in the paper to
Yeah.
go to,
go to
the
the
listing.
website, check.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll put together a very short, York Springs Parks Commission is hiring a director. Interested parties should go here. Okay,
Yes.
great, very good.
And then I take it your objective is to get this posted by the 15th of this month?
Yeah.
It runs for 30
I
days.
will take the feedback I got at this meeting, and I will tighten it up and get it ready to go. And I think maybe, Sue, maybe you and I and Ruth should get together next week and just make sure we're ready to roll, and then, and go ahead and do it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay?
All right. Anyone else have anything on that? Okay. Scott? Parks fees.
Okay, as far as fees go, I did give you 3 different forms. Our handbook requires the commission to approve any fees, and this just came up when I was creating these forms. So the commission doesn't have to approve forms and those sorts of things, but I gave them to you so you could see the context of what we're doing. The first one was application for reservation of space in a park for non-business use. And this would be, we don't have anything in place right now, like when somebody wants to take one of the parks for an hour, one of the gardens for an hour for a wedding or something like that. So this is just giving them permission to do that, and sort of enables us to prepare for it. Even when I was the gardener, there were times I would go to Weed Eat or what have you, and somebody's having a wedding there. This gives us some control of that.
Yeah.
So the only question is, do we want to have, as to this document, was do we want to have a modest fee like $50 or something? If we're going to make that park, not that it's going to be exclusive, but we are making it somewhat exclusive, do we want a fee for that? The next one is the field use guidelines and applications. This is for the ball fields. We, to my knowledge, have not charged for use of the ball fields, at least, well, for many years. I don't know if there was a time that we did, but the cost of maintaining the grounds for those ball fields is one of the most expensive things that we have, at least during the summer months. It takes a lot of time. It has to be mowed, weed-eated, et cetera, at least once a week, et cetera. So, again, this would be a form where if somebody wants to use the field for an event, soccer games, baseball games in the baseball field, et cetera. So picking what I thought was a reasonable rate, it was $20 per hour, and another $20 per hour if they're using the lights. The final one was the food vendor application, and that was, I started that one when I thought we were going to be doing the Fat Tire Festival this year. And so it would be for that sort of thing when we're having an event. This would be for the individual vendors. And at least what I've proposed is a $50 application fee, the booth rental space of $150 per day, and a $50 cleaning and performance deposit, which would be returned if they did clean and leave everything as required. So finally then, when I realized we didn't have any prices established anywhere, I created this price list that you also have. So a lot of these prices are based on what we are currently doing. Like for the shuttles, you've already established those rates in a previous setting or previous context. The shuttle advertisements we are currently not doing, but I think we should. Those are rates that were proposed by a previous director, and I understand they were at least discussed in some commission meetings, so I just used the rates that were once proposed. All the cabin rentals and other fees that are listed there are things that we currently do. Those are the prices we're charging. You see the ball field rental is in there, but we're not charging anything yet. The Basin Park art vendor permit, that's $50 per year, and a day permit of $10. We also, I don't know if you're aware, that is coordinated through City Hall. That's for those, the event permits are are coordinated through City Hall, so I don't have something there for that. But these art permits are ones that they come to us for. So again, this would not include if somebody wanted to do some sort of music event or something. This is just for the annual art permits. Finally, I did put some notes down there, just we did, number 3 there has some prices that other local campgrounds charge, and these were obtained by phone calls to those locations. Also, as I looked on the sites themselves, the websites, their quoted prices tend to be much higher. The phone call that we made was a few weeks ago when we're still in a down season. So the rates actually, per their websites, are $10 to $15 more a night. So if you look at what other places are charging, most of them are charging more than what, even what they quoted to us in a low, a slow season. It looks like there is some flexibility to raise our rates there, because it does look like we are one of the cheapest camping locations in town. Now, maybe we want to keep it that way. That's, of course, your choice.
I think we can do both. I think we can be competitive and still be the cheapest in town. It certainly looks like there's plenty of room there.
Yes.
And this is the one area of revenue that we have control over.
Yes. I should add that I did ask the manager, the park manager, who indicated that, she does get a lot of feedback. She actually does believe that there is room for increases. She doesn't get a whole lot of complaints about, oh, these prices are too high, and in fact, now and then gets a comment about, wow, that's reasonable. So
Yeah.
it seems like as far as public input, to the extent we don't necessarily track it, but just, what feedback I have from the manager, there's definitely some room for some increases in the camp.
So how many campsites
Pardon?
do we have right now?
Boy, I'd have to look at the map. I don't recall the specific number.
Okay.
I have a question. I've done a lot of camping, and I am not used to per-person fees for tents. It's been that you have it to your site and you bring the whole family along. I'm used to the fees for extra cars and maybe fees for extra tents. And I wondered if something that is done other places around here, if it's just a local thing that I haven't run into. But it would have to be on an honor system. That'd be hard to maintain. You could see if someone put up an extra tent, but knowing how many people are actually spending the night is a little tougher.
Well, it is somewhat of an honor system. On the other hand, we do usually go each morning and kind of police the areas. And yes, it may not be obvious that somebody has one or two extra people that they didn't pay for, but this is what we are currently doing. So
Okay.
that's why we're doing this in the workshop, because we may want to change a lot of these things.
Yeah.
It
I
may be-
mean, if it's not broken, we don't need to fix
Right,
it. It just
right.
struck me as a little unusual.
Right.
Yeah.
But here again, we could certainly, that's something that if the commission decides they want to drop, we certainly could.
Well, I think with the exception of the group campsite, which is at the western end of the field,
Yes.
most of the campsites are fairly close to each other.
Yes.
So the limiting the number of people per campsite is really more thinking about the other campers. You don't want to rent a campsite and then have 15 people show up to stay on it. So I think limiting it is fine. I think we'll probably look at the way everybody else does it and see whether it makes sense. But I would imagine that, the other campgrounds, especially KOA, is going to have restrictions on the number of people per campsite or the number of tents per campsite.
Oddly enough, we have prices that were quoted for KOA for regular camping. because the RV sites are separate.
Yeah.
But when I got on their website, I couldn't find any regular camping sites. So maybe they have some, and I don't know why they wouldn't be on their website. But it's difficult to compare apples to apples because
Yeah.
of that.
We don't have water at any of the campsites, do we?
We
Good.
do have a couple of campsites that have water.
Okay. And the ones with electric are just the ones down in the field, not over in the meadow, right?
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, also if you're comparing campsites, who has a shower too can make a big difference in price. It's available.
I'm sorry, who has a shower?
Shower available, that can definitely bump up the price of a campsite.
Right, the only showers that we have available are in the bathhouse.
In the bathhouse.
And so most of the, well, all of the campsites, except the RV sites, are down below in the field, and what we call,
But
there's a
it's not
field
that,
in the meadow.
it's not that unusual to have
No,
to
no.
hike a ways to
Yeah,
have a shower, so.
I don't know.
I mean, you look at Devil's Den, the way Devil's Den situates things, there's, within each cluster that has a bathhouse, there's some fairly remote sites to that, so.
Yeah. I would also, just one last comment I think that I'd like to interject is that we really should give a lot of thought to the field use guidelines, or the fees at least. We have not historically charged those. We're not charging anything right now, like there's the soccer club, and then the high school soccer team will use it as well. So that's a big issue. Do we want to charge a fee for those sorts of things, or should that be just one of the services we provide to the community? So,
I think we need to sit down with Sharia and understand what the deal has been.
Yeah.
Now, I will tell you that, and I know the same with Fat Tire, when I put on the Xterra Triathlon, I paid fees. I paid
Yeah.
use fees.
yeah,
I was required to rent all of the campsites because we had to have access to the beach, which meant that we set up in the field rather than down at the ball fields. So we had to rent every campsite so that we didn't disturb campers. And it was not a small fee. It was the second largest check I wrote every year, was
Yes.
to the parks, to be able to use the park for 2 days.
Yes.
So I don't think it's the least bit unreasonable to look at fees. Fat Tire, I think Dave said he used to pay $1,500 to parks for the use of the ball fields for the weekend for Fat
and that was a
Tire.
long time ago, but, adjusted for inflation, it'd probably be double that.
Now, I know that it was under Huss that those fees went away, and I don't understand why they did. The other thing is that we were required, and Dave was required as well, for Fat Tire Festival, to provide our own porta potties so that we didn't put a strain on the park system. So on top of all the fees that I paid, I had to rent from Steve, the guy, however many porta potties I needed to ensure that none of my competitors went up the hill and used any of the park's facilities. So those, I don't think, are the least bit unreasonable to require. If it's something that is going to either disrupt normal park operations, like we did with the campsites, or use a facility that nobody else is going to be able to use for that period of time, then yes, they should be paying a fee for it.
Yes. And something that's not on a price list and can't be are special events such as the ones you just mentioned.
Right.
I presume and hope that we'll have the Fat Tire Festival again. In the past, or recent past, I should say, I understand there haven't been fees charged.
It's only been the recent past.
Right.
I can guarantee you it's only
Right.
been the recent past.
These are just a few events that I'm working on that people have approached us on. There's the half marathon that I know I've discussed with you from time to time.
Yeah.
They want to do that twice a year here and make it, every year. Right now, there's not a mechanism really for determining what kind of fee we would charge for that. Maybe it's something that the director would have to come and make a proposal to the commission and see if it's passed, because there's another one. There's somebody who wants to do, kayaks and canoes. It's someone who sells those sorts of things, but they want to do like training,
Bring all the
show people
vendors
how to do those. How to kayak, how to canoe. someone who wants to do skills training related to, bikes. And this is one that's sort of been, it's tentatively booked. Fortunately, this one was easy because they all need shuttle permits, so that's an easy one to determine. They're going to use a portion of the field. It's not going to be exclusive. And here's, that's the same one. So we don't have any sort of, or the director doesn't have any sort of guidance on how to even begin to quote such fees. I'm with you that we should. I mean,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of time and effort to make at least an exclusive event like Fat Tire Festival. That takes multiple hours that there has to be a fee for, and there
Well, I
hasn't
will tell
been in
you,
the past.
on top of the fees that we paid, we also did all of our own trail prep and trail maintenance. I mean, I spent the 4 months before the event doing trail work.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't think it's unreasonable as long as we are providing a service that makes it a great facility for them to use.
Right.
So, trail preparation is probably the biggest thing for either the trail runs or for a bike race. And then, other than that, it's disruption of the other users in the park.
Right.
So,
Yeah. When we had bike events for BLM, whoever was putting on had to put up a bond, and then they check the trails afterwards and take money to repair the trails out of that, and then, anything that wasn't used was refunded.
Right.
But the trails had to be left in the condition they were found
Right.
in.
And I did include that in the food vendor application. But these sorts of events are all, these special events are a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
And it's probably something, I would recommend that the commission consider that the director would have to bring a proposal to the commission, and the special events have to be approved. There's no way we can include them on a list.
no, I don't think so. And I think it's, you're competing, with other venues that may or not be charging fees.
Right.
So, but I think we'll just have to kind of play it by ear a little bit, but I do think we should receive some compensation for somebody taking exclusive use of an area. And it's the same thing for a race. I mean, if you're putting on a race and you've got trail marking out on the trails, you are going to need to limit access to those trails, because I will tell you, the biggest issue we had, I had to get up at 3 a.m. the morning of the race to go on all the course of the bike and the run course, because people will have removed signs and course marking in the 2 days that they were up beforehand. So, we'll have to close portions of the park in order to do it. To do the enduro races, you close the downhills. I mean, there's no way you can run a race and have individuals out there riding the trails that aren't part of the race. So we just need to figure out what those fees look like.
And that being said, there may be other fees that someone on the commission might think of that have been missed. These are the ones that seem to be logical, and a lot of them are ones that we're already doing, but that, to my knowledge, have never been approved.
So I have a question, and this is kind of some old business, but I want to ask the question, it kind of ties into this though, and that's around the fishing bait and poles. Because I was just reading through the rules and regulations, and it looked to me like you're saying no catching fish. So if you're not allowing fishing, why are you selling bait?
Which rule?
This is page 10, section 211.16. Molesting, injuring, etc., animals, fowl, or fish prohibited. No person shall tease, annoy, molest, catch, or throw any stone, object, or missile of any kind at, or strike with any stick, object, or weapon, any animal, fowl, or fish in the parks. And I was looking for an exception with licensed fishing, and I didn't see it.
Yeah,
That might be something we want to
that needs to be added.
go ahead and edit and say, other than in the Black Bass Lake or Lake Leatherwood itself.
Yeah,
But
and if you are making changes, I do have some other comments too
Okay.
on this document.
Okay.
Well, what we could do is if you'd like, we could either meet or you could email them to me and then I'll write them up as changes and we'll get it on an agenda soon.
Okay. All right, so let's try to summarize what we're doing here. I think we've agreed that we probably have room to raise the camping fees
Yes,
and still be the lowest around and be reasonable about it. The event fees, we'll just play that by ear, but I think it should be based on disruption to regular park activities. And I do think we need to look at it. If we're doing an event like Fat Tire or like the Xterra was or like the marathon, I think we should require them to pay for temporary toilet facilities so that we're not overloading the park system. And that's not an unreasonable thing. Any event that goes on anywhere, the event director is accustomed to bringing in porta potties for them. As much as anything, it's for convenience.
sure.
So-
Well, depending on the size, like the one event, the bike skills training, they're talking 12 to 15 people. So
That's fine.
we probably need a threshold at anything over 50 people, for instance, just to pull out a number.
Yeah, we honestly ought to look at whether we ought to put a couple porta potties up at the upper shuttle turnaround as well.
There is
Is
one
there-
other thing, we currently charge for linens for the camping cabins, and I really have to wonder, although I put it in here just because that's what we're currently doing, if we're charging people $10 for linens, are they going to just go without it and sleep on the mattress? And to me, I'd rather have linens on the mattress than somebody trying to save $10 and, after they're biking or hiking all day, come in and lay on our mattresses. So that might be one that we consider dropping.
Why can't you have linens on the beds and charge a $25 or $35 cleaning fee, which would cover the linens and the cleanup after they leave? Because right now, you don't have that in there. It's just a room rate or a nightly rate.
Right.
Yeah,
That's pretty common. Just something to think about.
Right, currently, we do not charge for cleaning. We have someone that goes in and cleans after each use. We don't charge extra, that we just look at that as being built into it.
yeah. I guess I'm curious why there was ever a separate fee for that. Do we assume that some people bring their own linens with them?
I don't know. Like I said, I personally don't believe it's in our best interest because
Not either.
I think it's going to end up soiling the mattresses excessively. So that,
What-
again, is,
It seems like $64 a night for the cabin is still pretty cheap, and that just makes it one line and simple. So
Sure.
It's increasing the price $10.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's two ways to approach it. One is leave these rates and add a cleaning fee on top of it that includes laundering, or just raise the rental rates and get rid of the linen fee.
So that being said, there's a lot really to think through. It may be that we don't, let me know if we want this on the agenda in 2 weeks, or is it something we need to think about, come back, have another workshop, and then get it on the agenda, or do you think?
I think I think there's probably parts of it that we can vote on next time, the ones that we're fairly settled on, and I think the paddleboards, kayaks, fishing kayaks, canoes, those things are fine. Bait and fishing poles, I don't see any reason to debate that. Food vendor permits, wasn't there a food vendor like last year, or year before last?
Out at Leatherwood? Yes,
You mean
2 years ago.
fees or actually there, physically there?
I meant there was one there, because I remember seeing that on the 2019
Oh.
general ledger that we
I-
got.
I know what you're talking about. Yes, there was a food trailer there.
Do we know how that was structured? Was it a percentage of sales, or was it a flat fee?
No, it was a flat fee. I don't recall the amount. I can find out. It seems like it was pretty nominal, actually. I may be totally wrong, but it seems like, in the 150 a month range, it wasn't a lot. On the other hand, she only really was able to operate on weekends.
So is this intended to be 150 a month, not a day,
Which one?
the food vendor permits?
Oh, no, those are for the big events.
Oh,
But here again, I had to make up some numbers and
Yeah.
try to think what would be reasonable. This would be like the Fat Tire Festival, where you have all of the booths there. In fact, we probably should drop the word food, just make it vendor application. Most of them are food and drinks and
Yeah.
whatnot, but there would be other vendors as well that some of those things may not apply to that I have on the application, as far as, inspecting and the food inspections and all that. But we did have other vendors, people selling clothing and hats and that type of thing. But to my knowledge, there was no sort of form that they filled out. This
Yeah.
application and agreement would require, I think I had $2 million worth of liability insurance where we have to be co-insured. Limits things like the amount of vehicles that they can have. Only one vehicle can be in there at a time, et
Yeah.
cetera. So a lot of things that, beyond just the dollars and cents, which is why I gave you the forms as well, because you might want to at least review those and see if there's anything that you think I missed or maybe is too onerous.
yeah, that's when we're going to have to, I think we roll that into the fees for the event itself, because typically, what we would do, and it was the same way with Fat Tire Festival, most of the people who had booths there were event sponsors. And so they're already paying the event promoter sponsorship fee. Part of that sponsorship is giving them exposure at the event. So if they have to pay additional on top of that, it's going to put a strain on what you're going to, and I will tell you that most event sponsors were not paying more than, $400 or $500 in sponsorship dollars. So if they've got to pay another $150 per day plus a $50 application fee and a $50 cleaning fee, the event is only going to get half of what they would normally get. And the only way you can make money, well, not even make money. In the 5 years that we did the Xterra, we broke even 3 of those years. The other 2, we lost money. So they're not big money makers.
Well, we could also do like I did on one of the other applications where, here it is, the field use guidelines. It says if no fee is stated, the fee is $20 per hour. We could do.
Yeah, I think the way to look at it is if they are a sponsor that's just promoting their product and not selling anything, that's one thing. If it is somebody who's coming in to sell goods to the people at the event, then we can figure out some way to charge a fee on that.
And again, the commission doesn't have to approve the form, but I believe whether they're paying us or not, they've got to sign that form
Right.
and do the things like the insurance and those sorts of things, I think are.
Yeah, the insurance would be provided. I mean, typically, the insurance is going to be provided by the event producer.
Okay.
So, and that's why you get, for the Fat Tire Festival, you sanction it through USA Cycling because they provide the insurance and they will do the co-insureds.
Okay.
So,
It sounds if it's part of an event, it might be easier to tack the fee onto the event organizers, and then we don't have to deal with each vendor.
yeah, and it's,
And then they can charge what they charge.
so, and that's where I think your idea that what they have to do is come to us with a proposal, and it's the same thing we did. I had to provide a plan that showed where I was putting the transition area and where the parking was and where the event, sponsors were going to be setting up their tents and how many there were going to be. So that's not an unreasonable request for any event, is to give us a plan for how you intend to execute it,
Okay.
and then figure it out from there.
So I had questions about the shuttle advertising. And it comes from being a little wary of having parks be commercial and becoming
Yeah.
sponsors. On a vehicle, I mean, that's a little easier for me to swallow because, I'm used to ads on buses and stuff. But do we have a lot of people coming and saying they'd like to be sponsors? Or how would you find people to be sponsors? It seems like it's not quite right for the park to be out there selling
Well,
advertising
I
space.
think
Right,
that- I actually had a conversation with Jeff Carter at CAPC to try to put together a program that not so much sponsors as advertisers within town, and trying to find a way to demonstrate conversion, because there's a fairly strong belief of a lot of people that the people who are riding the downhill trails are coming over from the corridor, spending the day riding, getting back in their car and driving back to Bentonville or Rogers. And anything that we can do to promote overnight stays or the restaurants is a benefit to the community, as well as getting us a little bit of revenue to offset the expenses of operating the shuttles. So
Okay.
something like that kind of makes sense. Having a structure like this at least gives us a framework to work with. But I think the whole idea is trying to promote keeping people, when we get people here, is have them come for the weekend. And one of the things that Scott talked about was actually offering a either camping or cabin package with shuttle passes to get people to stay. And then, the advertisements could be restaurants or shops or whatever in town to try to drive people into town from the park. So,
Okay.
And the booking software that we've implemented, which, by the way, is going very well, allows us to create packages and coupons or discounts. If you get, say, 3 days' worth of shuttle passes, maybe you get 10% off on a cabin, or we could even co-op with local businesses where coupons are given and what. So we're just scratching the surface on what that software can do for us, but just what it's doing already is it's going well.
On these shuttle advertisements, I'm going to assume that's inside the unit, right?
In reality,
Then my second part to my question is, what about shuttle wraps or advertising on the outside of the shuttle?
we're,
I mean, 'cause
Couple
that's
components.
probably going to come up.
a couple components to the response. First of all, what I put in here was what was proposed and talked about in a commission meeting 2 years ago. So these specifically say shuttle trailers.
Okay,
So that's what was once discussed. Now, I rode in the shuttles 2 or 3 weekends ago just to observe, and I looked around inside, and there are some plenty of spaces inside if we wanted to. As you mentioned, wraps as well. David Renko is looking into, he has a source that he's used in the past that does the wraps and that type of thing. So we are looking at creating a brand of sorts.
Okay.
It'll take a month or a couple of months to work all that out, but creating a brand, color scheme, logo, et cetera, and wrap the vehicles, get rid of the, in fact, the job that we've already looked at, although we don't have the graphics yet, the place that he's come up with, that he's used before, will do all the removal of the existing labels. We would have the potential of putting advertisements on, we wouldn't want the whole
Yeah,
wrap,
right.
but small ones that could be
Right.
removed each year if we wanted to. Question is how commercialized we want to do it. For the shuttle trailers, that's pretty easy because there's, a bar that goes across and it's a matter of a small sign that you put on with 2 brackets.
Yeah.
If we wanted to do them inside, there is space to do that.
I think if you think about it, the fact that those guys are sitting in those things, as much as they're on their bike riding,
Right.
that's the place to do it, really, because
Right.
you're sitting on a bench. I mean, if you've ever been on a subway or bus, the band that runs above the windows is all advertisement. So that would be the place inside to do it. The trailer, I think, is an obvious place to do it. But I think we don't need to be in the bike park business, but we have an asset there that people are using. The shuttle is a means to that. It needs to at least pay for itself. and then spin off some revenue that we can use because those downhill trails are far more maintenance intensive than other trails in the park. So it's something that, the way I'm looking at it, it almost needs to stand alone and support itself, and the shuttle revenue is a means for it to support itself, kind of top to bottom.
And this year, the way we're going, unless something like another pandemic comes up, we should exceed I think it was $50,000 that I projected in the budget.
In total revenue.
And I can't see us not hitting that halfway through the season. So it is going well.
Yeah, well, I think the fact, I mean, you think about it, 2019, parks earned $42,000 in total revenue at a cost of $2 per dollar earned. Last year, we didn't lose nearly as much money, but we didn't make nearly as much money because the private operators were allowed to operate there with no compensation to us. So the fact that we've licensed them now, they are paying a fee per rider, so we're getting a minimal amount for each rider that they have in their shuttles. Plus, we've done a much better job of operationalizing ours so that we're getting the revenue from it. Then yes, we should be much better than break even, and it should help pay the expenses of trail maintenance.
Absolutely.
I'd like to talk one thing about Basin Park vendor permits. And I have an idea of how this operates, but I know that through the city, permits are issued for the parade activity and so on. But my question is, does the city issue permits for the use of Basin Park?
Yes.
know-
No, sorry, you weren't done.
And so I think they do, I'm not sure. So if the city issues a permit for the use of Basin Park, how do we get that communication, and how does that not conflict with something that they may not know about? Because I know that it has in the past.
Yeah.
And then how do we account for the 9 slots there that maybe some art vendor has already paid their permit? Because I've seen people that have paid their permits get run out because a permit was issued by the city. And so there needs to be a pathway of how this works that's clearer than it is now.
We probably ought to sit down with the mayor and Kim and discuss
'Cause it is-
what their
it is a-
process is and how because, I mean, technically, it is a park. It's
Right.
controlled by Eureka Springs Parks and Recreation Commission. So we just need to make sure that we're aligned on what's going on. I think, it became obvious when we were meeting with CAPC on their proposal for Fat Tire. They refused to tell us what they were planning to do in Basin Park because they got their permits from the city. So, yeah, I think there's no reason why we can't coordinate a little bit better and understand what it is. And you're right, that was one of the things when I was looking at the artist permits. If you've got an annual permit and yet there are permits being given to use the park exclusively for something else like a concert, what happens then? Have the art vendor permits been annual permits in the past?
Yes, there's been a daily permit as well. I don't know how many of those we've sold in the past, if any. Typically, we'd see the same people there. Of course, we didn't see anyone there last year.
Yeah.
But, in previous years, we'd see the same people. Also tried to tighten up the people who claim to be not vendors or not selling something by our rules. Included a statement that a vendor would include anyone who is providing a good or service for a suggested donation, because people have claimed that as a way to say that they didn't need the permit. So at least the way the current rules are, even somebody who is out there just asking for donations, in fact, somebody was out there today that was violating another rule that we have using our power for amplified music. In fact, that's a misdemeanor, 2 misdemeanor counts under city ordinances. So those are things that we need to police a little more.
Yeah. Okay, well, what I would say is, what you feel comfortable that we have kind of landed on this, go ahead and put on the agenda
Okay.
for 2 weeks from
Okay.
now, so that we can start getting things implemented, and the ones that we're not sure about, then we'll keep doing a little homework on them and
Okay.
figure out how we implement them. Okay, so the last item is first draft of bylaws for the commission. Now, they're fairly lengthy, and I didn't want to really go through the whole thing tonight. What I wanted to do, since this is really just a first draft, is that there are a few things in here that I wanted to get feedback from everybody on, so that we can go back, and when we do the revised draft, we can make sure that we at least have alignment on those bigger things. And so, let's just kind of go through it, and then we'll go through the questions that I have for you, and then if there's anything that from your review you have questions on that we don't cover, then we can go through those too. So currently in the ordinance created the commission, it requires a $5,000 bond for any of the commissioners. And when Sandy and I were working on these, one of the things that she is suggesting is that there should probably be a bond for any staff member who is directly involved in handling or dispersing funds from the park. So that would be essentially you and Nikki.
Yes.
Right. Now, in the ordinance, it clearly states that the bond is paid for through the Parks Fund, and I know that was one of your questions.
Yes.
But are we in agreement that they should also be bonded?
Doesn't the cashier at Lake Leatherwood at the marina handle cash?
Well, that's a good point. Anyone who works in the bait shop does handle cash. And as I think we all know, there's been at least one instance in the past, not recent past, entirely different employees where money was missing and unaccounted for. That was some time ago, but it does happen.
Yeah, I think the amount of money that the cashier handles and the amount of money that you and Nikki handle, I mean, I spent 20 minutes this morning signing checks for this month.
Right.
It's an order of magnitude different.
Oh, sure.
So, and having access to the bank accounts is different. So I don't know that it would
agree.
really be necessary to have bait shop employees necessarily having to bond them because the risk there is relatively
Yeah,
small.
I agree with what you just said. The answer is, if we've got our accounting controls in place, we're going to detect something pretty quick,
Yeah,
Right.
and that's the answer to that.
So maybe what we state is anyone who handles funds in excess of $1,000 or $500, whatever, some
okay.
amount. Shuttle drivers as well end up with cash, so.
So are they still taking cash?
It does happen, yes. If somebody comes along and they don't have a card and they're wanting to pay by cash, we're not going to send them away.
Okay. One of the things I had suggested to Sam is using the QR code that he
Yes.
has,
Yes,
posting that either in the shuttle or on the shuttle pickup sign, so that they can just simply take their phone, scan that, go directly to the reservation app and pay for it there, so that we don't
Right.
have to handle cash.
And
I'd
we-
rather they didn't have to.
I'm sorry.
I'd rather they didn't have to handle cash.
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
We have done that in a sense. We have just a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that has some instructions and the QR code.
yeah,
People can click on their phones, but there are still times when people pay cash. And, I mean, if we want to set a policy that says no cash, we could certainly do that. But then again, we do have wristbands, so I mean, there is a way that we can more or less track, sure, there's always a way
Yeah.
to cheat a system, but we can more or less track the amount of riders that we have and know whether we're not getting all of the fees that we are entitled to.
Yeah, I think it's more a matter of, you know, I would think it would be a whole lot easier on the drivers because they already have, you know, they have enough to deal with their loading the bikes and unloading the bikes and you know, to not have to deal with cash and keep track of cash in the vehicle. If we can push more people toward using the reservation app through a QR code.
Right, and there was a time where anyone that was paying cash had to go down to the bait shop to
Yeah, I
do
know.
it, so
That's-
we could implement that instead.
Yeah.
If-
No, I don't want to do that. That doesn't make sense. I think it's easier, you know, the only reason I could see is if somebody left their phone in their car. I don't know of anybody that does that anymore. Everybody sticks it in a pocket, rides with it, so.
Well, it happens more than one would expect.
Yeah.
We, on a typical weekend, may have $200 or $400 worth of cash from riders, and I don't know that we want to turn that away just because somebody either doesn't have a credit card or doesn't want to use it. But it's
Okay.
the commission's decision, of course.
Yeah, let's, I think we start by educating people. And that's just going to be, it's going to go on the drivers. You know, anytime somebody comes in with $30 in cash, they just need to remind them, look, guys, it is really easy to do this on the app. It makes it a whole lot easier if we don't have to handle cash. So I think that we can start educating people in that direction. I mean, you know, we trained them last year to just show up on site and hand somebody $25 and they could go ride a shuttle. And sometimes it was us and sometimes it was the other guys. So it's just breaking old habits and getting them moving towards new habits and just making it easier for us. Okay, on section 7 of Article 5, which is the second page, all expenditures must be reviewed and approved by the commission. Now, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, there's something in the statute or in the ordinance that states that.
Quarterly, you mean?
Well, that's what we need to look at. We need to set a limit for, there's a $20,000 limit for anything that has to be bid. Is there a limit that we want to set that requires commission approval to spend the money?
That's
So
certainly,
something below the 20,000, but, you know, what is it, $5,000, $10,000, single spend event that needs commission approval, a commission vote and approval. I think you're right. What we've talked about is we created the budget, and the budget is specific enough that as long as we're working within the budget, that that's fine. But if something comes up that requires money that isn't budgeted, what is that limit? And I don't know what it is. I'm asking.
even though it would tie my hands and the hands of whomever is selected for the permanent position, I would say absolutely we should have that. Could be $5,000. I mean, that's open for discussion, but certainly there needs to be an amount. It needs to be large enough to where it doesn't hamper us in our day-to-day operations.
Right.
But on the other hand, I can't envision a situation where a $5,000 expenditure would come up unexpectedly, except for some repairs or something. So if we did that, maybe some sort of emergency mechanism where I could call, not call necessarily, but maybe we have a meeting of the finance committee or something where we don't have to call a meeting of the commission, but we have a roof that's leaking and we need to repair it now.
Yeah.
You know, that it's approved by, and it might even be that it's approved by the chairperson.
Well, and that's the
or-
thing. I mean, every check has to have two signatures.
Yes.
So it's your signature and mine, Scott's, or Dave's at this point, so the officers. Is that sufficient? Does everyone feel like that's sufficient review? Or is there a dollar amount between 0 and 20,000 that it should come to the commission for a vote?
And I should interject, there's legislation pending that would raise that to 50,000.
Okay.
I think that if we're a situation with a leaking roof, you need to take action to prevent further loss of that asset.
Right.
So there's some things you just have to take care of in an emergency situation like that. But sometimes we create our own emergencies because we have a lack of maintenance.
Oh, yeah.
And that's a different story. So if we're in a situation where we don't know which way, I would err on the side of caution and talk to the chair, get some documentation of approval, or bring it to the finance committee, and we can meet, give me 2 days' notice or something. And
Yeah.
it's just
Okay.
So some sort of expedited mechanism if there's an emergency. Obviously, if there's an emergency in the sense that I have to act now or there's more damage that's
Correct.
going to be incurred, then I've got to be able to act. So we would need some sort of language for that sort of emergency. But even if it's no more than a verbal approval from the chairperson.
Yeah. So again, it's like I said earlier, so there's going to be things that is going to skew toward policy, and I think that's what we're talking about now, is establishing the policy around it. The rule, which is the bylaws that kind of sets the statutory limits, if you will. We're fine with the language that's, because the interpretation of the language of all expenditures must be reviewed and approved by the commission is covered in the budgeting process. How we go about with special expenditures, we will set as policy, and we'll do that in the policy manual once we get past the bylaws. So, okay. Commissioners shall receive no salary for the services, but shall be reimbursed from the Parks and Recreation Fund for actual expenses incurred in the performance of their duties. Has anybody had expenses that they've?
I don't turn
And do
them
we
in.
what would we anticipate is, because I guess what we're looking for is, do we need to set a threshold on this of prior approval before incurring certain expenses as commissioners? And I don't know what that would be, other than going to a seminar somewhere or doing something, and I would think that we would do that together, but does it need to be part of the bylaws to set a limit on that, or is everyone just comfortable with that statement and knowing that?
From an audit standpoint, if, as a commissioner, I'd like to get reimbursed for a $30 ink cartridge, because I print out everything from Parks, which I'd never turn in, but anyway, some people might. It would be good to have, as an auditor from the state coming in, I'm going to look to see if that commissioner got approval to spend that. And if it's not clear in the minutes, then it should be clear in our bylaws, then it should be in our minutes to cover ourselves. So maybe if there's an expenditure a commissioner would like to be reimbursed for, bring it to the finance committee. Bring it
Okay.
to the board to get some documentation that we knew about and we approved it. That would be good. That's the way I would handle it.
Okay. The finance committee would make it easier, because then it could be a quick communication rather than waiting potentially a month for the next meeting. Okay. Now, this is one, we don't currently have the ability to do this, but it has been suggested, and in fact, the CAPC has this, which is an at-large position on the commission. So, under B, qualifications, commissioners must be citizens who are qualified electors of the municipality or the county in which the municipality is situated. Upon a finding and ordinance that there are no qualified electors living in the city limits, a city of the first class or a city of the second class may allow qualified electors in the county in which the municipality is situated. So this would require us to go to the city council and get an ordinance to change the makeup of the commission, but it would also help us fill seats because we've got a slightly larger pool. I mean, there are a lot of people who are parks users who live just outside the city limits and well within the county. And like I said, CAPC has an at-large commissioner as part of their makeup. So it is allowed by state statute. We would just need to we'd need to work with the mayor and the city attorney, get some language drafted to have an ordinance change.
That's just one at-large, is that
Just one
correct?
at-large director. So is that something that we think we want to pursue? Or does anyone have a specific
What's the
objection?
rationale, just that we're having a hard time filling seats, or?
It has been a problem in the past. I've talked to people going back to the inception of the commission when, they would have difficult time getting, I know they've gone through this with the planning commission as well, getting enough
Sure.
people to staff it. I mean, when I had to get planning commission approval, the 2 times I went, there were only 4 commissioners there. So if you didn't get every vote, you were out of luck. I think it's just something that gives us, like I said, it gives us a slightly larger pool, and it's still people that we normally deal with. Because you don't have to go far south of 62 to be outside the city limits, or far to either the east or the west. So, in fact, a lot of the land between Lake Leatherwood and town is outside the city limits. All of Pivot Rock Road to the north is out of the city limits, so. It's just a question, we would still have to go, in order to pursue it, we would have to go through, work with the mayor and Tim Weaver. But before I even started that process, I wanted to make sure we had some alignment, that there's no objection to it.
I see both sides of it, and I don't, I could go either way on it. I'm not opposed to it. It's just sad that there's so many people that live here that want to tell everybody how to run the town and what you're doing wrong, but nobody wants to come up here and do what we do. And that's the sad part about it.
Yeah.
So now we need to look out for people that outside our city limits that might be willing to contribute. That's what we're looking at.
Okay, I'll at least broach the subject with Butch and see how he feels about it, and then we'll discuss it further. Attendance requirements. This is something I noticed in a lot of the commissions, both Rogers and Fayetteville have parks commissions. They're, like I said, they're more advisory commissions than actually statutorily authorized to run the department. They advise the department, but most commissions have attendance requirements, and what seemed like a fairly consistent one was missing 3 consecutive meetings or missing 6 meetings in any 12-month period is cause for the commission to remove that commissioner. So I know there have been issues here in the past of people just not showing up for meetings. So is that something we want to include?
I think that seems fair. I mean, if you can't make it for whatever reason, you can't.
I mean, it doesn't seem too burdensome. I mean,
No, that's,
3 consecutive meetings or half the meetings in a year.
Right.
And I'm just talking about meetings, I'm not talking about workshops. This is just the official meetings where we have to have a quorum in order to get business done, and we need people to show up. But I'm thinking, this is thinking long-term, into the future, and
sure.
one thing I've been impressed with is that everybody shows up for these meetings. This group of commissioners has been very good about it, so.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry, I'm just going to say, to me, supposing you've had a commissioner who's been on for a long time, good commissioner, communicates an event, she's going to be out of country, or he's going to be out of the country for 3 months, but he's going to come back and wants to be on the commission.
Yeah.
Do you want to lose a good commissioner? So maybe it should be, if there can be a little wiggle room or option in there.
yeah, and I think the way to word it is that this is kind of the trigger that gives the commission the ability to look at it. Because right now, we don't have the statutory authority to remove a commissioner, which I find odd, because apparently the CAPC, it's just the opposite. The CAPC has the authority to remove commissioners.
Right, it's the council here, right?
It has to go through the city council.
Yeah.
But at least this gives us a criteria for doing that, so that we don't have a perpetually vacant seat. And then Section 10, duties of the secretary, and Dave and I were talking about this briefly. I think right now, a number of these things are things that Scott has been taking care of for us. And I think the way we'll word this is that the secretary may designate to the executive director or park staff certain of these functions, and it's probably in our best interest, since you're maintaining all the records now, and you're doing a much better job of maintaining records than has occurred in at least the recent past, that a lot of these things flow through you anyway. And I think we can just do that by simply stating that the secretary shall assume the following responsibilities and may elect to delegate some to executive director or staff. Okay. I think those were the big ones that I had. I do want to point out that one of the things in the secretary's duties that she had here that I do think is a good idea is the secretary shall schedule with the chair FOIA training for the commission. And I think that's probably something we ought to do. I think the municipal league offers something on that it would probably be a good idea to do that on a regular basis, on an annual basis.
Yeah, I agree. It seems like it's something that,
It'll just,
as a new commissioner, you definitely want, and even just to review it,
Yeah.
to keep it fresh, is, I think, important, or it kind of slips.
yep,
I think the same should hold for the director and the clerk as well. I
the
think
FOIA
that should-
training.
Pardon?
You talking about the FOIA training?
FOIA training?
Yeah,
The, our handbook does require a certain number of hours of training, but it doesn't say in what. But FOIA, probably OSHA type thing should, I mean, I think that handbook or these bylaws should specify certain sorts of training that are very important.
yeah,
Again, OSHA is another one, but FOIA is one that can get us in hot water. So
yep, and has.
Yeah, I think with OSHA, though, it's very job-specific as to what training you need.
I'm sorry, say that
I'm
again.
not aware of like a general OSHA training. It's kind of something that's very specific to certain jobs and functions.
Right, right. But there are courses that are available for those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Even if it's something that's produced that's an online type thing, it doesn't have to be that it's going to be something expensive that we have to
Oh, no.
send somebody out to. Those things are available.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, so I was reading this, and I was actually kind of interested to find out what your responsibilities are. And I'm not sure I got it from this, because you say you were a contact for the executive director, but I think you actually do more around that. And then I think you may have some other duties that aren't really listed, so I just want to make sure you include what you do in there. Under Section A, duties of the chair?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, basically these are the statutory duties of the chair.
Okay,
So
okay,
setting the agenda for meetings, calling meetings, presiding over meetings, and primary contact for the executive director. Those are really the statutory
okay,
definitions of what the chair does, and then vice chair assumes the duties of the chair in absence or disability. But it's basically chain of command. Statutorily, the chair has no more authority over governance than any other commissioner. Okay?
I did make a note of the chair setting the meeting agenda, and I didn't see that there was a procedure for any commissioners. Not that you would necessarily not put something on that a one or more commissioners wanted, but I did suggest that possibly a procedure that if, maybe it takes two commissioners that request that something be put on the agenda.
Yeah, again, I think we're trying to separate policy and procedure from governance.
Okay.
That the how is really more of a policy and procedure sort of thing. I thought there was something in here about that. May have been something else that I was reading. But, yeah, the chair just sets the agenda for the meeting. That doesn't mean that they're only the chair's agenda items, and that's the same reason, the reason why I've asked you to send the agenda out the week before so that everybody can provide feedback and we can figure out what goes on there. The only time we've ever pared an agenda down is when it's just gotten too long to reasonably do in a couple hours, so. Anything else we need to get in the next draft? Nope. All good? Okay. I would like to suggest that we have a quick workshop next Tuesday at Basin Park to discuss issues, and Scott and I have we walked through with the engineer a few weeks ago. But we've walked through other items in the park, and they're kind of indicative of issues that exist in a lot of the spring reservations. And I thought it would just be easier to discuss if everyone was there and we could look at it and talk about it so that we can start putting a plan together as to how we go about doing these things. I mean, there's a lot of issues around neglected maintenance in the past that's causing issues, decisions that have been made about not removing trees that should have been removed a long time ago that are now causing issues, dealing with, some of the clutter that exists, especially in Basin Park. There's all kinds of clutter that we need to look at. And then it'll also be easier while we're there to discuss the issues that we know that are going to have to be addressed, that kind of have snowballed from looking at how we go about correcting the issue of the fountain settling. So is everyone available to do that next Tuesday at 6? Okay. And I'll send a note to Ruth and let her know about it. But that's going to be key as we go forward and look at kind of revising the budget based on some of the things that we're learning about, so like the dam railing, the work at Magnetic that's going to wind up being more extensive than we thought, Basin Park, which is going to be much more extensive than we thought, and just give you guys a better understanding of what it is that's causing that. Okay? Mm-hmm. All right, so unless anyone has anything else, I think we're done.
And you did say that workshop would be at Harmon?
No, Basin,
Oh, Basin.
at Basin Park, in the park. We'll stand in the park, that way we can point at things and say, okay, this is what we need to address
At 6 o'clock?
at 6.
Okay.
Yeah, there's still almost 2 hours of light now, so.
I would just offer that I assume even though we're going to focus on Basin, we probably should discuss Magnetic.
Yeah, we will.
And so since we probably won't go there, we're going to be at Basin, if anybody would like me to show you the issues sometime during this next week, I'm happy to meet you out there and show you some of the issues that,
Well, it's pretty obvious there's issues if you just go and look at that.
pardon?
It's pretty obvious there's issues if you go and look to see how wet it is where you should be standing.
Well, but it's more how we're going to correct it,
Okay.
or how we propose to correct it.
And there's issues, and this is what we're finding as we're kind of digging into things, is that there are issues in all of the spring reservations that have kind of been either put off or not really considered that need to be addressed. And I think the first thing that we had talked about doing is going in and identifying things that can be done now to mitigate further damage. And get those budgeted, get them approved, and go get that work done. And then figure out the things that are going to be a little more complex And quite honestly, I mean, the obvious thing, it has to do with drainage. I mean, most of the spring reservations were built with adequate drainage originally, 125 years ago, 100 years ago. But they haven't been maintained properly, that drainage is clogged, it's causing problems. Those problems, the fact that every time it rains, it overflows with water, it creates even bigger issues, which undermines the foundations of the structure. And so those are going to be a little bit longer term. We'll address the mitigation issues as soon as we can. And then we'll start, actually, after our walk with the engineer, we're waiting for him to get back to us with a proposal to bring in an engineering firm that will take core samples in Basin Park to determine the amount of settlement of the fill underneath the plaza, because that's the fundamental cause of a lot of the problems there, is that fill was placed around the turn of the previous century. It was not done in a very controlled fashion, typically wasn't at that period in time, and you tend to get a lot of differential settlement. And so that's why the surface of the plaza kind of waves all over the place, and why the fountain is actually, if you look at it, it's like sagging on both sides, not just one side. And it's because there's no real solid foundation underneath it, so.
And I did receive that today.
Did you?
Right, and
Okay.
I've been accumulating other bids as well on the tree issues and magnetic, and we should have some rough numbers to put to what we're discussing next week.
Good. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.